I am that Weems guy, and I have lost control of this episode before it even gets started. There are some shenanigans afoot, and we probably won't stick to any sort of plan, probably because we don't have one tonight. Um, at TacCon, multiple people came up and said, I really like the haphazard nature of the last couple of episodes. Well, if they like those, they're going to love this one. All right. So, because if what happened before I hit the record carries over, this is going to get rather interesting. In my lower left-hand corner, I don't know whether they're appearing for everyone else, but in my lower left-hand corner, we have the dynamic duo together in one spot tonight. Mark, introduce yourself.
Hi, Mark Fricky, retired sergeant for Prescott, Arizona Police Department. Was their cop for 28 years total. Firearms instructor, been a firearms instructor since 1980. Worked for a major national training organization. Run my own firearm training business and get to travel around the country and teach police officers how to be instructors. So that's me.
Rob Garrett, the other side of the AARP screenshot tonight. 38 years with Columbus, Georgia PD. Ran a training division, worked professional standards, investigated a lot of officer-involved shootings. Been writing, starting with Harris, now with Athlon since 1984. And a self-avowed J-frame addict.
And Rob is not here to play the foil tonight and make everybody mad. He's
you know, if they see I'm on this, you won't get any viewership, or you'll get a whole lot, one or the other. It's like in the middle.
And they are together at Rob's house, so that's why they're sharing a camera screen here.
Is someone translating for them? Because Arizona and Georgia may not be the same language.
Actually, I can speak Southern.
Okay.
I got it.
Now, Mark may fall asleep halfway in between the show because he's been used to different times. But
no, he's on his second nice pour of Hooten Young. So
quite tasty.
Erick Gelhaus.
Erick Gelhaus, retired cop out of Northern California, finished up as a patrol sergeant running firearms field training, occasional gun writer, formerly with SWAT, now with Firearms Media Group, teach at Gunsight, dad, have my own training company, Cougar Mountain Solutions.
Bryan Eastridge.
Let's see. I am the frequent guest on the Handy McMood Off Duty On Duty podcast. Kidding. No. So Bryan Eastridge, I've been a cop for almost 21 years. I'm about to retire, kind of on the injured reserve list right now, which is why I'm carrying the DB Pillage and Plunder Special Kit. I've got a training company, Eastridge Training and Consulting, which is also a Patreon page if you're interested in tearing into your own guns and maintaining them. Got EDC Belt Company. That's my main jam other than police work, which is on Lee's hat. Mine. What's that?
He's on his third pour now.
I ain't mad at him, man. Let's see. And since there's Hooten and Young, I have a little Buffalo Trace going on. But I thought at some point I'd do a little bag dump. If anybody wants to see my injured bag, I thought if it was going out on YouTube, I'd kind of make a funny on that. But
this is a paid endorsement for Wilderness Survival.
Yeah, Wilderness Tactical. Sam, thank you so much. Got the DB Bad Santa limited edition patch. But I thought some interesting tidbits that I carry around in here. Number one is a 2011 extractor, because everybody needs one of those because they, fail all the time. Spare mag for the gun that actually works. That's a Glock 17 mag. Screwdriver for the 2011.
Does that also work on a revolver?
It will work on a revolver. If you Patreon, you've seen that screwdriver before. And then this one, that's for fitting the extractor on the fly. So when your extractor dies in the gunfight, you can throw another one in. There's that.
As long as the firing pin stop doesn't drop.
There's that. Exercise-induced asthma. PTG SAP. This one I'll have to kind of cover. It's a 3-inch K frame because you got to have a 3-inch K. Snuff, because can't trust a man without a good vice. Wallet, light, reload for the K frame, and DB patch. And I think that'll get me through a school zone, as Wayne Dobbs says.
And
So-
as I said, I've already lost control of this episode.
Just
right,
grab
Lee.
the reins, brother, and hold on.
Well, before we get into our actual topic for tonight, we're going to turn it over to Mark and Rob to ask the three of us questions about TacCon, because Eric and Bryan and I were each presented at TacCon, which concluded this past weekend. And so, Mark, Rob, take it away. You two fight for whoever's going to ask what.
Well, I'll start because I don't know what you guys taught. So why don't you tell us what you taught? That I mentioned.
Well, TAC what?
TacCon, short for Tactical Conference.
So it's the Range Master Tactical Conference put together by Tom Givens, combined with the old Polite Society match for the last few years and for the foreseeable future. It's the Dallas Pistol Club in beautiful scenic Carrollton, Texas.
Well, Eric,
So-
go ahead and tell them what you taught since you've.
I was just trying to help with the TacCon thing.
Yeah.
So 5 classes, allegedly in the running for the Rented Mule Award that Lee fell through on producing. Classroom stuff was ready positions and better outcomes, looking at the research on where we have the gun and how much information we can process and how that translates to things working out the right way. Our favorite studies, which was Lee, John Hearn, and myself production. There I was covering some research on the speed at which you can stop shooting, as opposed to start shooting or keep shooting, but how quickly you can get off the gas, and the likelihood of too many rounds going down range. Also did a thing with Lee and John Dobb called The Aftermath, where John and I both talked about our shootings and what happened afterwards. And Lee came in and talked about some changes in Georgia state law related to officer-involved shootings during his tenure as the chief deputy. And did broken and blocked optics, like what to do when your dot gets covered in crud or the battery dies or the windage adjustments completely fail, and how to keep the gun in the fight, because there's a progressions of really bad things before we get to those. And then the last one was reactive shotgun, using the shotgun in a home defense scenario, not to go out and assault the Nakatomi Plaza, but how to deal with somebody booting in your front door when the shotgun's your weapon of choice. That was my stuff.
But Lee doesn't like red dots.
No. And there, of course, naturally, I post the picture of Lee shooting at the dot with the power down in that broken and blocked class. And somebody's like gets in there and is all serious. Like, Lee's been to hundreds of hours of training. Like, you're not paying attention, dude. Shut up.
Yeah, as Eric told us to turn our optics off for that drill. The current shot, he announces to the class, Lee hates red dots so much he turned his off in the middle of a class.
With friends like that.
Yeah.
Well, and then since we got to work on the water thing, because Lord knows dots won't work in the rain,
Yeah.
I sprayed his down with water. Shut up. I'm not saying it. And made him work through the problem. Made him work through the problem of having water on the dot. So I also accused him of trying to drown his optic.
On a serious note, in previous classes that I've shot that were dot classes, and they did a down optic thing and dumped water on your stuff, I was always shooting an open emitter optic. In this class, I was shooting a closed emitter optic, and there was a tremendous difference. Closed emitter is the way to go.
Yes, it is.
Way to go. I did not teach a live fire block this year because I was being obstinate. And Tom and I had agreed on what I could do, and I submitted it, and someone else said no, and I said okay. And then they said, "Well, where's your live fire classes?" I'd already submitted it, and you said no, so I'm not submitting another one, just because I was going to be obstinate that way. As Eric said, I did a class with he and John Hearn on studies, and I presented one on basically the failures of academy training, where Force Science studied academies in the US, Canada, and England, and traced students that were being supposedly taught, simple skills and complex skills. And the way they measured those out was simple skills was one that had 5 steps or less, and complex is one that had 10 steps or more. And they came back and they tested the students or the cadets 1 week after the training, 4 weeks after the training, 8 weeks after, so forth, and how much of a skill degradation there was, because all of this was blocked or siloed training, whichever one you want to use term. And the skill degradation was tremendously drop off because there was no connection made to the training. They were just checking boxes, not actual learning occurring. Also did the aftermath as Eric mentioned, with he and John Dobb, and just basically relaying some things that took place in two deputy involved shootings, in which I did administrative investigations running concurrently to the criminal investigations, and some things that transpired with that, and some policy changes and all that came out of that, both within our agency and our state investigative agency. I also took Michael Green's live fire block on we call it advanced covert carry drills. Took that with Eric. We were shooting buddies on the line, and milled around a bunch of other classrooms and stood in the parking lot and talked to Bryan a good bit. So, Bryan.
Well, I taught a condensed form of what I normally teach in a 2-day block called skill building. And I titled it The Fundamentals in Context. And it was really a pretty simple shooting block, but it exposed a lot of shortcomings in some people's training. And then I use Cooper's Combat Triad. I give them kind of a general overview of that as ways to identify shortcomings in your training: mindset, marksmanship, gun handling, and gun handling. I don't go into the tactics side. And I break each one of those down and give a little bit of a lecture behind each one of them. And then I do what I call an abbreviated Dobbs safety brief, which is like I take one of the safety rules and I give an example of when it failed and how we apply that in the context of being the gun-toting populace, right? And I give examples in police work and civilian or armed citizen where those have failed, where somebody ignored a couple of safety rules and those failed. And a lot of them were firsthand accounts that I've been involved in. So I did that. And then the shooting is everything's done from low ready, gun in hand. And we progressed to a dry block into making 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shots in a kind of a narrowed up time frame with a regimented account for accuracy. So it really exposed a few things with some of the red dot shooters that there was a lot of self-discovery involved in that. Like, oh, I've never shot from a low ready before. Several of them have been on the red dot path for a long time and went, oh, I just found a gap in my game. And the iron sight shooters, a lot of the class had never spent any time starting with the gun already in the hand in kind of a challenge position. So it wasn't so much a let me teach, coach, and train you how to shoot well as much as it was evaluate where your gaps are in training and use the combat triad as a template to figure out where we need to go with our training. And being it was my first time at TacCon, I teach that block in a even more condensed form. So it was just kind of a teaser for a 2-day block. And I got a lot of good feedback, so I felt pretty confident about it.
Yeah.
And I got to introduce my lovely muse and anchor Trish to all of my gun boyfriends, as she calls them. So
Yeah,
one
we got to see the white girl.
that one even got Tom Gibbons. So
one class that I should probably point out that I took was John Holston's class, and where he's been working with a light system developed by Dustin Solomon that has given him a way to measure people overshooting on targets, how long it takes them to recognize there's a transition needed and make transitions, etc. John's been on the show several times. He's one of the best thinkers in this business, and it was really interesting to see how he took traditional range things that we're doing and converted them to what actually is going to be successful in the field. And that was a really, really, really good class. I also took Erick's class on the ready positions, etc. His classroom presentation.
I know Daryl was there and Caleb was there this year. Yep. And anybody want to share, he is quite the ambassador for Taurus now and putting out a lot of good content. And I know Taurus is on the move in the right direction. So would somebody like to share about both Caleb and Daryl?
I didn't make their class.
I caught Caleb, and first of all, you mentioned John Holston. He and I gun nerded in the parking lot so long that I got like a third-degree sunburn. So that was awesome. Thanks, John. But had a lot of good discussion. But Caleb and I were bouncing off of each other throughout the conference. We both shot wheel guns in the TacCon match. And he was he buddied up with DB for a couple of blocks. And then he shot most of his live or all of his live fire blocks with a Taurus. I think it was an 82.
82, correct.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is basically,
and
basically Model 10 for the Taurus line.
yeah, and he and I were kind of paired up in Tom's "How Qualified Are You" class, live fire block, and he can run a revolver. There's no doubt about it. And that Taurus performed flawless. Same Taurus that he shot in my class at Revolver Roundup in November, and proceeded to punch the X ring out and the 10 ring at 25 and 50 yards standing offhand with. So, like you said, that was kind of our deal this year, was kind of explore revolvers, and he did a lot more of it than I was able to. But yeah, that was kind of, I don't want to speak for Caleb, but every
Yeah.
live fire block he did, everything he did with a essentially the Taurus Model 10. So
How long is TacCon?
3 days, Friday,
And
Saturday, and Sunday.
how many people show up?
If you count presenters and RSOs along with paid attendees, there's 450 slots roughly. We had like 50 no-shows this year though, so roughly 400 people in the facility. I never ran into Caleb throughout the whole weekend, and he was not officially part of TacCon.
No, I think he came and shot it. He came in.
Yeah, he came
Yeah.
as an attendee, and
Yeah.
Daryl asked him to participate in a couple of his blocks. Erick and John Hearn and I did walk back for one of DB's blocks, and he had asked Rhett Newmeyer to step up with him during that one. And someone took a great picture of Erick, John, and I standing in the back ignoring Daryl as he spoke.
well,
Yeah.
Caleb was there as an attendee, and Friday he didn't get there until very late because he had some delays with flight. But
Yeah, it's a very big delay. Myself.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, somebody else that's really pushing the envelope is Red, and some of the stuff he's doing too.
You know, it's with the 400 people there, and this was bigger than it was in previous years because they made some parking changes where we could get some more people in. It's funny, every year there are people that I trip over. Every time I go somewhere, I run into them. And then there are people that I didn't even know were at the event until I see pictures.
Mhm.
And so, you know, because I never cross paths with him. I've never met him in person, and then never crossed paths with him that I recognized. Last year, everywhere I turned, I ran into Masa Yub. This year, I saw him like 3 times from across the, kind of waved, and then finally ran into him, got a chance to speak. And then
Just
I
out
saw
of
pictures of
curiosity-
somebody today that I didn't even know was there. Go ahead.
Out of curiosity, is the shuttle bus from the hotel a normal thing?
We did that last year, and we did that this year. I don't want to step out of turn and speak, but the costs far exceeded the efficiency of ridership. Let's just say it cost, based on the ridership this year, $400 per rider. So I don't know that that's going to continue to be a thing. We can't, well, I say we, Tom's who's doing it. I don't know that Tom's going to continue to spend that amount of money and it not get used any more than it did.
Oh, well, I wasn't aware there was one available.
Okay.
I didn't know until a couple days before, but having all my like presenter guy gear, you know, I didn't get to utilize it, but as an attendee, I would have, you know, but this year was the first time I noticed it. And I think there were more on the last day using it than there were the first couple. So
I hadn't heard about it, I don't think, until Friday. Like Friday was when I heard something about it. So
just people know what they paid for an event, and they look around and they start doing math and they start counting up. Well, wow, look at all the money they made. I don't know how much we spent. And again, same way as Tom spent on like glue this year, but I know last year over $700 worth of sprinkling was bought to put the targets up. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of overhead
With
that
a
goes into this
something that
stuff.
event that big, there would be, right? All of us running our own business, and we all understand that overhead. A lot of people don't, thinking that you're making all these big
Yeah.
bucks, but they don't understand the fact you got to support all this stuff too to make sure it works. So,
Yeah.
what about the match? I want to hear about the match. That you guys
I
had
was
there.
I was happy with the match. Not as happy as I could be,
As
but I
was
was
I.
happy with the match.
Talk to me about it.
The way the match is run is that on Friday and Saturday, you're given an assigned time to show up and shoot, but there's some flexibility in that. We had a thunderstorm hit just before setup on Friday morning, so we didn't even get the match range set up till like 10 o'clock or so Friday. There's a series of standards. They set the timer up. You get 4-second exposures, and there's different things you have to do at each yard line. There were no reloads on the clock, but because you got some people shooting revolvers, you got some people shooting combat micro guns and everything. Long story short, if you dropped any points in the standards, you were pretty much eliminated. And then there's a tiebreaker. That's basically a Comstat scoring type thing, or a time factor, hit factor scoring to break any ties. Unfortunately, as the audience knows, I've been having a lot of problems with my hands. I had surgery on my strong hand in August. I've got the same condition in my left hand, and I'm moving it freely tonight, but sometimes the tendon and the trigger finger on my support hand locks up, and I had exactly one of those as I on a support hand only shot, and the gun popped on me, and I pulled a shot and lost a couple of points there, so I was out of it. And then after that, I just had the concentration, and I dropped another shot that was not anything related to a medical condition. It was just me dropping a shot. The top 16 men go into a head-to-head shoot-off, and the top 8 women go into a head-to-head shoot-off. Heather Reeves was the women's champion, and Mirko Mugli was, for the second year in a row, the men's champion. And it's a pretty intense thing. It's just you get caught up two at a time, and you battle it out in a head-to-head match, best 2 out of 3 to move on. Lane Thayer inherited my title as high lawman for this year. And Lane was a machine the first couple of matches. He got eliminated in the semifinals. His first match, I don't remember who he was shooting. He got up and he did not miss a shot anytime he came out of the holster. Sat that guy down on 2 straight strings, sat the second guy down on 2 straight strings, gets up for his third match, and he got beat in the first string. He leaned over and said something to Tom, and I couldn't hear it from where I was at. It turned out that he told Tom, the first 2 matches I did what Lee told me to. That time I did what Hearn told me to.
Oh God!
And then he got eliminated, and then Mirko ultimately went on to win. Bryan, your thoughts on the match?
Very good. I am a big proponent, and in all of my gun boyfriend and gun nerd talks with guys like Erick, Daryl, Wayne, Mark, all these guys, and Justin Dial specifically. He and I bounce stuff off of each other pretty much weekly or monthly at least, and all of us are kind of wired in that. What can you do in a given time frame, as opposed to can you beat some metric that someone has created, right? So the match, I actually emailed Tom and said, "Hey, Justin Dial wants to see the match, and he's gonna email it to me sometime here in the future, the match standards." But thought it was really well laid out. I shot it with the 3-inch K frame, 13-4, last FBI issued revolver. Uh, I cleaned it, and I shot the tiebreaker in 3.57, which I felt like was the ultimate appropriate time. And I was a second off of the shoot off. So the last 3 years, the matches, just the level of shooter that's been in the match the last 3 years has increased. 2019, I made the shoot off by some fluke or miracle. I don't know what happened. We had bad weather in Louisiana, and that particular match involved a lot of courses of fire that I had just shot in Wayne Dobbs' class like 30 minutes before. So I walked into there, warmed up, and like, oh, the 5 yard roundup again? Okay. I just did that. Wow. So I like that it changes every year, it adapts every year, and you pretty much don't know what you're walking into. Um, and I enjoy that because it's uncomfortable and it pushes you to go, okay, what do I have in my tool chest right now? Um, and this was only the second year out of 4 years I've attended TacCon. The first year and this year were the only two TacCons that I think I didn't drop points in the match. Um, so, and this year I did it with a revolver because I've been shooting a lot of revolvers lately. So that was kind of a good feeling. And then Caleb bested my score by a solid second. So good on you, Caleb. But so Caleb and I think we were the only two that ranked in revolver. We were like 1 and 2 in revolvers, and he was like number 18, and I was like number 58. So we were joking. Well, I guess we took first and second in the revolver side match or something. I mean, just in jest, um, and I said it last year, and I said it in 2021 at Dallas. You could have taken the top probably 60, 70 shooters and just replaced names anywhere on the board because it's a really high skill set now that gets into the final 16. So
Yeah, it flips dramatically from year to year.
yeah,
Last year I was in the shoot off and was high low man, and this year I was 54th.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's, to me, that's a testament that the match isn't just a rinse and repeat. It
Mhm.
will expose somebody's shortcoming in their game year over year. So yeah, the match was laid out well. Everything was on a 4 second par time. There was no, and it's a turning target match. And what I found coming from law enforcement, you pretty much shoot on turning targets exclusively when you're in qualifications or training, etc. You're going to be on an air driven system and you get accustomed to it. And a lot of people that have never done anything but shoot on a timer, it really changes the dynamic.
Mhm.
And with the level of skill sets that I'm seeing year over year, what I'm seeing is the turning targets are no longer an issue, right? People have kind of figured that whole thing out. So yeah, it was a good match. It was a great match.
Eric, did you have a comment?
No, the flipping is right. My first TacCon, I was in the top 20. This was before the shoot off era had come in. Like last year, I was in the 60s. This year, I was 20, I think 29th, and I was in the high 20s. So yeah, it can bounce back and forth, but I do know this year both the main shoot and the tiebreaker I cleaned. It was clean, shot clean. So, and I was
The
like
cutoff,
3/10 of a second off the cutoff.
the cutoff, if I
Yeah.
remember, was clean and 225.
I thought they said
Yep.
2-4.
Okay. Last I heard was
Yeah.
220. It may have
Okay.
dropped even more even after that. So if you dropped any points, you were pretty well out.
Yeah. No points down, just not fast enough on the
Yeah.
tiebreaker at 2-7.
Yeah. I mean, like I thought, man, I just smoked it in 3.5 with a wheel gun. I'm in. And I went to Julie and I said, how are we looking? And she goes, you're at least a second off right now. And it's getting,
Yeah.
that
Wow.
top 16 is getting narrower and narrower.
Yeah.
So
What was the tiebreaker?
Tiebreaker was from a low ready at 5 yards,
Mhm.
5 shots to the head.
Okay.
4-inch circle,
4-inch
and
circle.
range master target.
But you shot from concealment, you shot from low ready. Bryan mentioned the turning targets. You shot freestyle, strong hand only, weak hand only. So kind of like taking Justin Dial's 5-yard roundup, checking out the initial shot from the holster, but running the 4-round stage from the holster, running the 2 and 3 round stages. So.
Got it. Okay. That sounds cool.
And what did we go back to? 10 or 15? 15?
Went back to 15, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Two shots from 15 from a low ready in like 4 seconds.
Yeah.
But what I really liked about it is everything this year was in that 4-second window. They didn't change the exposure times, and the closer you were, the more you were expected to shoot in that 4-second window. But it was never so fast that you had to outrun your headlights.
Yep.
Yeah.
You just had to do everything perfect.
Yeah.
And then the 5 shots was the air it out. You know, it was individual timed 5 shots to the 4-inch circle at the head at 5 yards. And that was really where the tie breaking or the shoot off was determined, was on that. So.
And every type of gun out there. I mean, there were no race guns? Were they all good?
There was a race gun.
There was a little bit of everything.
There was a race gun.
Did the race guns win?
No.
Good. Okay.
You're supposed to shoot from either concealment or duty gear if duty gear is applicable.
Okay.
Some people's concealment's a little on the iffy on concealment side, but they typically don't make it.
It was covered.
It was covered in what I could tell.
And the mag well was about the size of a pie plate.
But my setup, I had actually a leather strong side holster, and it wasn't broke in. So I borrowed a JM appendix rig from Daryl the night before the match. Went back to the hotel room, figured it out, and then I swapped some stocks from a gun I picked up in Georgia. Swapped some Eagle Secret Service stocks onto my 13 and took the Tyler. I was going to shoot Magnus with a Tyler T just for purity, and I realized, it's going to be kind of hard. Or it's going to be harder than it should be. So I put on some Eagle Secret. So I changed my stocks and holster like 12 hours before the match, and then, but it worked out. And oddly enough, in the match, I was 2x2 loading out of my pocket, and I had speed loaders, and I was done and back, did my high primer check, all that, and back in the holster about the time the guys running magazines were. So I felt pretty good. It's like, I still got the revolver thing. We're good. Moving on. But I mean, I really, even though at 58 in that field of shooters, I was like, I'm not disappointed in that at all, because that was me running a revolver
against autos. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I didn't feel like, oh, well, I got cheated, or the match was centered towards these guys or whatever. It really came down to the headshots. So
any lessons learned regarding equipment and failures that we want to talk about
from the match or from the conference?
Just in general. I mean, did we see, for instance, most of the red dots held up, and not trying to do a deep dive.
I was aware of one red dot that came off a gun. I was aware of a couple red dots that showed up broke, and they came and took the broken and blocked optics class with the broken red dot, which I thought was kind of cool.
That's good.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like, it's already broken. So there were a couple things they couldn't do because I wanted to establish baselines with them shooting with the dots, and then put them into taking away the reticle, the dot, whatever you want to call it. But they did fine. I saw one optic come off a gun, and this wasn't the optic. I think this was the person's mounting system, which is why I've been pushing that LA Sheriff's mounting system so hard, because it's the one I've seen that works consistently the most.
Yeah.
Across the board.
What about guns predominantly? I mean, your normal flare?
Yeah, you're going to mostly see striker fired stuff. Well, of course, there's a lot of appendix carry, a lot of dot. You'll see a few people breaking in with some staccato stuff, but not as prevalent as in some of the other settings that we're starting to see creep in. Still see occasionally you see some 1911 stuff breaking out. This year there were some people that came sporting revolvers.
Good.
But as Eric said, saw a couple of people that were trying to cover race guns, and it didn't do any of them any good. Come match time, I really think to go back to the match, I think the format of that match really is an equalizer.
Yeah.
At least the way we ran it this year, because there was nothing that really gave anyone a distinct advantage, and no reloads on the clock and that stuff. And okay, maybe there was a little thing if you're shooting a staccato or a full size Glock 17 or something on the tiebreaker compared to say someone running a shield or something, there may have been an advantage, but on the standards portion of it, no, there was nothing that gave anyone an advantage. If you took care of your business, you took care of your business.
Yeah, I saw 2 instances of I won't call it a complete equipment failure. One was a dot that had somehow or another gotten lint or deodorant or something in an open emitter optic. The guy brings it up, and I see him doing the wrist circles trying to find the dot, and then he defaults to his iron sights and finishes the course of fire. And then he looks down and goes, blows on his dot. He goes, oh, there it is. Just some little piece of something had blocked the emitter. And then I had one dot, a guy brings it up cold out of the class to do some dry practice work that I was rolling through. And I watch him reach up there, and he's turning the intensity up because we had sunlight directly overhead, which I wouldn't call that a failure, just kind of maybe a training consideration. But being in the self-discovery mode that I was kind of preaching, he was like, ooh, yeah, that's something I've not run into, having the sun basically backlighting us to that degree. And then my second block, and in front of Wayne Dobbs, I break out the G47. I don't have a great zero on it just yet. And I cracked my first shot high at 5 yards on a 2-inch circle. And I was like, that was purely me. And then I shoot the next 3, and they're on the left side of the circle. And I'm like, yeah, so bad on me. I had a gun that I didn't have a total confidence in the zero in that I demoed with, which, I'm not a dot hater, and I'm not an iron sights like preacher. It was just, that's just 2 examples that I saw where we had a little shortcoming with equipment.
Self-discovery.
Self-discovery. There it is. Luckily, I know how to do Kentucky windage on the fly. So, but the first round, I shot my G45, and I was anchoring them. So I was like, okay, still love that gun. It won't die. But, and then I said, like Mark or Rob, you were asking about different types of platforms. Lots of SIG products, lots of Glock product. Saw a few HK VP9s. And then I saw one guy shooting an Infinity, which was probably, half the value of my truck, and shot really well. And I saw a few more comps this year than I've seen in the past, like people with integral comps on their guns working. So that was kind of an eye opener. I'd never, with the macro and a lot of the stuff on the P320s with bolt-on comps. I didn't see a whole lot of Glocks with comps this year, which I've seen in the past, which that was kind of interesting. And then I didn't have anybody shooting a revolver in my block. I know there were some people that may have played with them in DB's block or something like that, but nobody showed up to my block, and I kind of spec'd it needs to be a semi-auto. And not near the presence of DASA guns that I've seen in the past either. That was another surprising one.
I think I saw one SIG Legion, and then the only 2 DASA guns were Ernest and Amy.
Cindy Bowser in the
I
women's
never
shoot
saw
off
her.
was shooting a SIG TDA.
I saw one guy with a CZ75. He showed up, and he was hot, very proficient shooter. So he adapted, and I didn't really have to give him any coaching. He'd already kind of understood the progression. So, but I hadn't seen a CZ in like, especially a DA CZ 75, and he had the model with the decocker. So, um, I didn't see the prevalence of that like I have in the past.
And we'll say
Me
that
being
the
one.
SIG P365 is very popular amongst female shooters. I did not personally see any macros or the LE side carry without the velocity reducer. I saw a lot of regular 365 XLs among shooters, mostly women, but some men shooting them. And then that Walther PDPF, I think that's the thing, is what it's called. That kind of catching on amongst the female crowd as well. I know Tatiana Whitlock's been pushing that, and that's what Heather Reeves shot to win the match.
Yeah, I saw two of I don't remember if it's a SKU for SIG or not, but it's the XL grip module with the shorter slide.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Had a female shooter show up with one of those, so like she could hold on to it,
Mhm.
and did a fantastic job. I saw one of the macros that did not have the velocity reducer slide on it.
Mhm.
Uh, there was one guy, I don't know if he was a cop or what, but he had one of the macros with the without a comp, and I don't know, he might have just put a standard XL slide on it. I didn't ask, um, and I just didn't see the prevalence of some of the other platforms I've seen in the past.
Speaking of mine's a 365 carry. I did not shoot it this weekend. I did take it to the range this past week and shoot it. We had to run a qual for a new guy, and I took it and ran it for that. Um, I'm pretty impressed with the gun. I'm still trying to learn it. My optic hasn't come in for it yet, so it's got those really tall sights on it, which I didn't do any work with it to figure out where the point of aim, point of impact was. I just loaded it and ran out and shot a qual course with it. I did come back to the office and take the magwell off of it because I thought it was pushing away the bottom of my hand from the grip. And just in dry fire, I like it better without the magwell.
Sounds like a good roundup. What's next?
We'll say there were 42 presenters this year. Probably about that same number next year. There will be some rotation with some people that got scheduling conflicts or that just Tom's going to change up some things. So there'll be some new blood there next year as well. There are some people that don't present every year already, and so figure about 40 presenters. We'll be back in Dallas. It will be the first weekend in April because the last weekend of March is Easter in 24. But we'll be at the Dallas Pistol Club until Dallas Pistol Club says they don't want us. That's just too easy of a location. 2 airports within 15 minutes of the range, lots of restaurant support, lots of hotel support within 10 minutes of it. It's just a great venue. And so expect us to be there.
Well, the big question, did anybody make it to Jackson's?
I did not. I didn't have the time to leave the DPC.
Understand.
Yeah, me either.
Mark, did you have any other questions about TacCon?
No, I think I got them all. That's pretty much good. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to trying to get into it next year. So
we'll try to make that happen.
all right.
Bryan, any follow-up stuff on TacCon?
Yeah, this was my first year as a presenter, and Tom alleged that he was going to invite me back next year. I hope so. Next year I'll probably offer a little twist on that block, but I got to say the presenter dinner was incredible. That was a great event, and I was just really one. I was honored to be a part of the presenter cadre. Two, I wanted to throw wanted to throw 2 shout outs. One to Ryan McCann, because my vanity finally got the best of me, and I was like, dude, I'm having a hard time walking. Can you throw my gear on, take me to the bay? And and it's that deal. And then Evie Kolskar took a picture of me and the lovely Miss Trish. She had a Polaroid one step at at the dinner and throw a quick shout out to her because she took like the cutest picture of all time right there. My lady making me look like a curmudgeon, but anyway. And then what was the final? I had a third one. Just the, let me think of how to phrase this. Trish came as a guest and she had never been around that crowd before. She'd never seen, she knows Melanie Bulkey. They're buds. And now she's buddies with Sam Dazonia from Wilderness. They're all, pals. But the one thing she remarked was, I was really impressed to see just how normal the people are that come to that event and like how friendly everybody was and how like it was a real like tribe, you know what I mean? Where everybody was so accommodating and friendly and and then the last thing she said was, I'm glad I got to meet all your gun boyfriends that you textcapade with and all that. She got to meet like Erick in person and have dinner and Wayne Dobbs, of course, but and Tom and just everybody there. And she was just like kind of overwhelmed with like, wow, these people are normal and they're really nice. So that just goes to show you what kind of a tribe that Tom has built around that community. And yeah, she was like, I really kind of want to go next year. So we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah,
that was
60% of the attendees this year were first time attendees.
oh wow. Yeah, I
Yeah, we
didn't
had like
realize there was that many.
179 first timers
Wow.
this year.
Good.
That's
Okay.
impressive.
And since you mentioned the picture, I must point out that Tamara Kill got several great pictures of Eric and was posting
And the
them in the
chess club.
group. And I lost track of how many people came up to Tamara and said, wow, you even made Erick Gilhouse look good.
Yeah, and yeah, and let's throw a special thanks to Tamara,
Yep.
who her photographic and photo like artisticness. I know she got some really crappy pictures of me because she is the only person that posts pictures online where I don't have a stupid look on my face. It's a running joke, but she goes, yeah, I sort through all of them, and Tamara does a fantastic
does.
job every year.
Yes, she
So.
does.
Eric, any closing thoughts on TacCon before we move on?
Coming from the cop in the military world, and having started to make a pretty serious effort to try to understand decent normal human beings before I retired, more so than I was getting with working with them at gunsight. It's just super neat to spend that much time around normal folks, not cops, not military, right? Though they're there, but be able to spend just time around normal human beings and such a diversity of them, and be able to talk about things and from experience, from research, and try to find a way to communicate that to the decent normal folks that show up at the conference to try to give them some benefits.
Along that line, Luann Hamlin was a first time presenter this year, and she hauled in a steel target system to use for a class that she was teaching. And she made the comment that once her class was over, all of the students in the class stayed around to help her load the targets back up.
Yeah.
And that it was over in 10 minutes. And that usually she gets left on the range having to do all that herself, and it takes an hour or so. Yeah. And, she seemed to be genuinely happy to be there, and she was very well received by the TacCon.
Good person.
attendees.
I know Lou well. She's a good lady.
Had her as a student. She's awesome.
Yeah. So, folks, if you're listening, be watching. I don't know when the registration for 24 will drop. It sold out in record time this year. Part of the reason we had 179 new attendees is that a lot of the long-time attendees, I've got till October to buy my ticket and everything, and they fooled around and it was gone. So when it is released, I'll drop it in the show's Facebook group, so you can get in there in a hurry and get your spot signed up. It is the best dollar for dollar training event that you can attend. It is just, and not only is it a training event, it's a social event, it's a family reunion. It is truly a spectacular weekend. And I came home thinking, yeah, on Mondays, like, you know what? Don't obsess over what you're going to teach in 24. You've got plenty of time. Just calm down. And then yesterday, Tiffany sent me something about getting started for 24. Like, well, we're right back in it. The planning process has already started.
Just for the audience, what is tuition, Lee?
It was 500 and something this year.
Okay.
And, yeah, and so think about that. Most of the traveling trainers in the top shelf are $200+ a day for their classes, and so you're getting 3 days of most of the top shelf out there that you can get into to see for under that amount, plus all the social time and network. Sometimes I'll have a class picked out on my schedule that I'm going to go attend, and then I get roped into a conversation walking to it, and I look around, it's like, okay, all these people here can be teaching the class that we're standing there talking to, and you get just as much information out of that. There's also a social tent that is normally set up that can be kind of a central gathering spot. It got commandeered for some classroom this year because of the weather, and just
And
an outstanding event.
And there's the hotel lobby.
Yeah.
And there are some of the pickup dinners.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of time to sit down and socialize with folks outside of your normal peer group.
Yeah. I know there were people that were coming to the hotel lobby to hang out that weren't staying at the hotel.
Yeah.
Just to be part of all the social gathering stuff that went on.
Well, thanks for the brief.
I'm sorry.
That was.
What'd you say, Rob?
I cut him off.
No, I was just saying thanks for the back brief. It's been really interesting, and hopefully I can make it sometime.
Sure.
Didn't mean to cut you off, Ron.
No, Lee mentioned the social and like the family reunion thing. I saw at the dinner, Tom made the statement at one point. He said, as far as our family is concerned, like me and Lynn look at you guys like you're our family. And I'd never really caught on to what he was. I mean, he mentioned it a few times, but Lynn, who couldn't be in attendance, is on Zoom on a projector, and everybody's walking by saying hi. And I was like, it was kind of moving. I thought, man, they really do feel like this is a part of their extended family, and they treat everybody that way. And it was the social aspect Lee talked about. I had several students that listened to the podcast that have seen me on this podcast or primary and secondary or my own or whatever it is. And I don't do a lot of open enrollment training. So I had a lot of people coming up to me just in between classes, picking my brain about things because they're like, we don't normally have access to you like this. And pretty much all of the trainers that I've ever interacted with, even going as an attendee, you're going to get the exclusive access to, hey, I got 5 minutes of this guy's time because he's a normal dude like me. He just has a good curriculum and a base to teach from. And I had one guy that I've run into at SHOT Show and some other things that signed up for my class just because he wanted to see, like, what's your 2 cents on this? And after the class, we talked for 30 or 45 minutes at the back of my truck, and that's kind of invaluable when you're on the journey of handgun training, just to be able to pick somebody's brain for 20 or 30 minutes. And even if it's like, what kind of coffee or bourbon do you like? What, like, and that's just life stuff, it's not just shooting stuff. It's like life stuff. Right. So I really enjoy that part of the event, and I especially enjoy getting to hang out with the chess club. And we didn't even
you
talk
brought up
about
the bourbon and the coffee, and I'll just throw a shout out to our buddy Bill F, because I don't know if he wants his last name out there or not. Right, this guy took my shot. Yeah, this guy took my shotgun class last year, and we didn't have any racks on the range, so we were decking the shotguns on the ground. It was a time suck. This year, he shows up with 3 shotgun racks and yoga mats for my class so that everybody can rack their shotgun. The yoga mats are there to protect the muzzles, and we didn't have anywhere near the time suck with it and got everybody on and off the guns as quickly as we possibly could. And that was an attendee who just wanted things to flow better. Not to mention the fact he's the concierge to the tactical elite when it comes to bourbon, books, cigars, coffee. Yeah.
From the family aspect, Eric and John Dobb and I did a class called the Aftermath. And in that class, we're talking about what happens after a deadly force incident. John and Eric was the first person, there was the incidents they were involved in directly. We had an attendee who has been involved in an incident and basically had a flashback in the middle of the class and had realized there were some issues that they had not worked through and had kind of a moment. And I talked to that individual later, and they made the point of saying, I'm glad that that happened here amongst this group of people who won't think it's weird, who won't, whatever. Just because I was here, I was here amongst my friends and my family who understand what was going on. And she talked about how therapeutic, in the class, it all came up. It's like, okay, I got some stuff I got to deal with. And, better that happen in a situation like that than in a board meeting somewhere.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That, that and back to the den mother. So he found out Trish was coming, and Trish likes rye whiskey. And he brings us like 6 bottles of rye whiskey, and he goes, yeah, and I got this, and this. And I said, okay, well, yeah, I'll take one for you. And he goes, no, I brought this for Trish. It's not for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. But the point being, I mean, that guy has a heart of gold.
Yep.
And I don't think TacCon would, and he does the same at Revolver Roundup.
He did it at Thunderstick Summit.
Thunderstick. If he's in a class that Wayne's hosting, like I would show up and go, crap, I just barely got here in time. Didn't have time to grab chow. Hey guys, I got breakfast burritos for everybody.
Yeah.
That's just the kind of guy he is. And I can't pay him. I took a 1911 commission build, which I don't do anymore. And I was like, yeah, bro, I'll build you a cool one. Just because that's how much I care about the guy. And 2, that time putting together that gun, that is a small down payment on how much he does for that community. So,
Sure.
Good deal.
All right. The reason we all gathered tonight was because we were going to talk about what we've been jokingly referring to as range katas. And please understand that we're not singling out any instructors individually. Nothing like that. None of this is to play gotcha. I did hear a great joke about podcasters at TacCon. I said, when men mansplain things to other men, we call that a podcast. Well, okay.
And Hanny and Lee have 2 great ones. So tune into Hanny and Lee's podcast.
Right. In Erick's block, one of the Davis boys, myself, and there was a lady that has a podcast sitting there, like 3 of us in one class.
Who was the gal?
Erin.
Oh, Erin O'Donnell. Yep.
Yeah.
Girl with a gun.
Yeah.
Good podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes of hers. Good podcast.
Yeah. But in our Texcapade that all of us on the show tonight are part of, we got to discussing range katas. And what we're talking about there is things that get introduced in the classes and that some instructors do, like scan processes after a shooting, after you shoot a string or whatever in a class, shuffling side to side in your shooting position on the line to try to simulate movement. And all you're doing is really shuffling from side to side and not moving. Just those type things. And so, Mark, I'm going to throw it to you to start that conversation.
Okay. Well, I was the one actually suggested we do this one because I think it's important. I think a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do on the range, we're seeing guys do, have at least initially had purpose of trying to break a square range mentality that we're shooting pieces of paper. And most of the tactics and techniques that were out there for years and years and years did a great job of defeating a piece of paper, but weren't really designed to go against real human beings that were doing things beyond what that piece of paper was. Everybody felt good about, doing this and that. The first one I'm going to go to is my experience back in gun sight. We started with the eyes and muzzle going together, and the term we now use is paint defense, where you take the muzzle of the gun, you scan left and right, supposedly to break tunnel vision. That was the idea behind it, which was a good first start. At least it addressed the issue of fact that we are going to have tunnel vision, and we are going to have this focus down range. But the real world is it's not a paper target, and the real world is bad guys can be behind you. So the idea of being able to change out and do something different with that was a good start, but it wasn't enough. And I go back to it because that was what I was trained on, being a gun sight graduate, and believed in it until I got involved in my shooting. And the last thing I wanted to do at that shooting was take my gun off of that threat that I just shot. But yet, had I not had my partner come beside me, if I had somebody else come beside me, I probably wouldn't be here today, because I did not look behind me, because I was never trained that. I was never trained to look around the area to see if there were other threats. And so it changed the whole way I do training as a result of that. And then we've seen the progression through the class I teach for the national organization, where, again, trying to break a range mentality of just facing down range to make a 360-degree environment. People were dancing around in circles, and it was a start. The concept was good. The application was valid as far as trying to break that, but it just didn't play out the real world of what we need to do. So we need to get a balance in there. But and then again, I see instructors that now come out, and everybody wants to put their own spin on things. And Daryl, wish Daryl was here because he quoted better. But Scotty Reitz, who you guys may or may not know out of LAPD, said anybody who was turning around and turning their back to a threat that they just shot had never shot somebody, because you're not going to turn around that threat. You're going to keep your eyes there, but you still need to look behind you, because unfortunately we have lost officers from not checking their six, and we've lost troops in both battlefields, recent ones, for not checking their six. There's a time and place for it, but it needs to be dealt with in a way that it's not a set martial art that this we're going to do every single time we do it. And if you don't do it this time, then by God, you're wrong. Yeah. So that's one reason why I want to get passionate about this thing, because I think it needs to be more reasonable on the expectation. Erick's discussion on the ready position, I'd like to hear more about that. I think it's a good content, because again, Rob and I were talking today about ready positions, that I've used ready positions since I learned it in 1978, and I don't point guns at people that I don't intend to shoot. And we had a lot of officers walk around with their guns up in the air, pointed at everything in the world. And I didn't do that, but he said they don't do it out here in this part of the world. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but being the fact that I train around the country and I train officers from all four corners of the United States, and in the middle, I see a lot of different mentalities and ideas. One of them that I like is the bungee quarters, who bring the gun out, they shoot, immediately bring the gun back into their chest instantly. Or the guy who's a speed holsterer, who holsters his gun as fast as he draws his gun. As soon as he fires around, up his back and holster. A lot of this is competition based. A lot of it was, again, good concepts to get some other ideas on how to do things. But I think we need to come to a balance of it. And I don't think that we're doing a good job of that. So I'd like to hear more on Erick's part about the ready positions as far as what you guys were teaching, because I have some real good concepts of that too, but I've talked enough.
Go ahead, Erick.
So before I hit the ready positions, like Mark, I came out of the gun sight tradition. Well, first I got it from LAPD and then came out of the gun sight tradition. So I am comfortable working from a low ready, and I'm also coming back to an assessment, a down and scan, if you will. Where I think problems start is when you get the student who isn't trying to work the process and is trying to work the technique. So the instructor's going to, if I don't do a scan, the instructor's going to say something to me. So I'm going to go and then put the gun away. Well, you didn't freaking see anything, and it looks, it's a waste of time. From there, then we get into the question of context. And you guys already brought up Uncle Scotty. And I went down, it was my last stint in gang, so it's probably 2011. We went down and did some vehicle takedown work with Scotty and his guys. And without going into the whole thing, I had a shooting problem I had to solve that took place between the A pillar and the B pillar of a car and in the front seat. And I fired my single shot. It was a headshot right where it needed to go. And I come off the gun and I go into the assessment and I start working that target left, target right kind of thing. And Scotty makes contact with me in an oh so delicate and gentle way and says, "You got A pillar to B pillar. What the hell are you having to scan?" I don't. Right now that carries over to a hallway. So now I'm at one end of a hallway. I have a problem at the other end of the hallway. It's problem solved. Bad guys down. Do I need to rotate left and right? Oh, maybe I need, if there's doors off the hallway, I need to pay attention to them. But am I really having to work 45 degrees to either side? No. Change that to I'm in a bar. And I just dumped a dude at the counter in a bar. I don't know if the full 360-degree turn makes sense.
It doesn't.
But what Spalding and Douglas talk about is taking a step and turning at a slight angle to open up your vision that has the bad guy in one side of it and other people in the other makes sense. But again, it comes back to the context, right? Am I in a fight front of the fight? Am I in a fight at the front seat of a car? Am I in a fight in a hallway? Am I in a fight with a whole lot more people around me? And what I see from students, just like the snatching the gun right back, because I fired my shot and I got to pull it back right away, the just waving the brush left and right, neither of those make sense and they're not acceptable.
What we talked about, Lee and I talked about over dinner is, you know, the Southeast, we did not have the gun sight and LAPD influence on us. And we had the state training facility. And other than that, you had Rogers and you had Mid-South. And those were both competition driven, shoot fast, shoot accurate. But I mean, for years, and Lee has talked about that, and I have to, you know, we were taught search at the end of the muzzle. If I'm coming into a room, you know, everywhere I'm looking, that's where the muzzle's going. And it's only in relatively recent times that has started to change. And you know, Lee's been an adamant disciple about that for a good while, along with you know, DB and Wayne and other folks. But again, we put muzzles on folks all the time. I know that's a little bit off the topic, but it also goes back to what's been taught with competition. You know, if you run your IDPA local match and you instill the rule you can't sweep a no shoot, you know what happens?
People fall apart.
And that's not, I mean, so you know, Georgia was kind of a wasteland, really, unless you had the money and the time to go to Prescott and go to gun sight, yeah, or something. And so we were well behind the power curve on some of that, I think. And Lee and I have had that discussion before. Yeah, the snapping back, the tactical dance, the Charlie's Angels muzzle high, and all this stuff that you know they've seen somewhere. You know, John Wick 4, which is great entertainment, but that's what it is.
Bryan?
Yeah, so you guys hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. These are sound. I'm not using my normal setup, so I can't hear myself because anyway. The big one I saw, and I tried to bring this out in the class without, you know, throwing daggers or any of that stuff, was a lot of the stance stuff. You know, one of the questions I pose in my lecture, and this is, please don't think this is me patting myself on the back because I came up with this. It wasn't, but just exposing people to this for some self-learning. I had a kid come up and I said, show me your shooting stance. And he gets into what looks like about a 9-year-old taking a karate kata test stance. And I go, okay, that's a very optimal or optimized shooting stance for breaking a metric. Who gets to decide where your feet go when the fight starts? And you just see like light bulbs kind of come on. And I said, chances are you're going to be standing in some format that you don't want to fall down, so your feet are going to be staggered. So let's start from there. And then it was to tie in the mindset piece. I had everybody, and I wrote on their target the target scoring zone that they were going to hold for themselves. And the first question is, well, what are we shooting next? Like, why are you concerned with that? Well, because I want to set all my stuff up to do the best. I said, well, then you're engaging in this range kata. You're trying to optimize every single thing. I want to know what you can do when you don't know what the standards are, other than the standards you're going to hold for yourself for accuracy. And then everybody said, oh, I'll hold the 10 ring on it. I'll hold the 10. I'll hold the 10. And I had a couple people go, I can hold the 9. Like, oh, why is that? Well, I don't know what's coming next. So I think I can competently hold that. Guess who the shooters were that performed better on that? The ones that said, I'll give myself the 9 ring. And they were shooting 10s and X's, not knowing what the next exercise coming is. So I tied it in with mindset and marksmanship, right? And the whole purpose of that was, if you don't know what the conditions are, what are you capable of delivering right now? And again, light bulb moment. I said, so all the other things that were, well, anchor your feet 6 feet apart, stand as wide as you can to control the menacing recoil of a 9mm. You don't know what the time with a whatever, right? And it leveled the playing field, and 2, it made people go, oh, well, am I doing this for the purpose of breaking a metric, or am I doing this for the purpose of I can deliver this? I don't care what you call next. And I contextualize that to kind of self-eliminate some of the kata stuff, right? And I'm guilty of it too. When they said, hey, you got a 4-second time standard, I went, well, I'm going to widen my stance because I don't know what's coming next, but I'm going to be ready to shoot it in the match, right? So I set myself up to be perfect. One of the things I did was I got to allow people to buddy dry practice, where somebody's racking the slide and simulating recoil for them. And you wouldn't believe the number of people that found a pretty natural shooting stance. It was weird. But it was more driven towards, instead of training for metrics, train for what you can deliver when you don't know what the metrics are. And then I told everyone, after I had them pick their target zone, I said, all right, if you shank 1 out of the target zone, you get to download your gun and go over here, and we're going to do 10 dry presses for every one that's out of your scoring zone. And I see like half the crowd go, oh, can I change mine? Can I change mine? And I'm like, well, that's a mindset issue, right? Because now that you know there's something punitive afterward, you're willing to hold yourself to a higher standard, as opposed to the people that went, I'm comfortable holding a 9 on a B8. They were like, yeah, go. So the people that were really thought they were really at the razor's edge of performance decided, if I don't know what's coming, I need to give myself some forgiveness all of a sudden, now that there's a punitive. And I didn't ultimately do that, right? I just said, no, we're not going to do that. But your mindset now is determining what your training should be. And it was like, you know, but the purpose of that was to eliminate range theater and range kata just by pressure testing what their abilities are right now, not knowing what's coming. Because who determines when the fight starts, right? Or and I borrowed that from Tom. Like, who gets to determine when you get to start the fight? You determine when the fight starts, but they determine what brought you to that point, right? Nobody tells you, oh, hey, there's a fight coming. Put your feet 6 inches apart, ball of the foot, any of that. It just happens. And we spend a lot of time trying to beat metrics on the flat range, when the reality of it is we need to see what we can deliver right now when we don't know what the metrics are. And then the look over the shoulder thing, I don't have a huge problem with that. I have a huge problem with, okay, I'm going to put my gun in some awkward position and I'm going to do this theater and turn and move and all of this. And I've seen people do that in real life. And I'm like, you just shot at a person, dude. Like, what are you doing? Like, bad guys right there. So you've got to think, like, can some of that be detrimental? And we look at the context of it. We had some officers that brought up, hey, maybe when we make entry on a high risk warrant, the guy in the back probably needs to be checking over his shoulder to make sure Bubba and Jim Bob, the two neighbors that are friends with this guy, don't come in and try to assault us from the back. Okay, how many of you are running high risk warrants? Does that facilitate that we need to anchor this into our training? Well, if I'm doing those all the time, absolutely. If I'm not, maybe it's, hey, do I need to take a quick peek over my shoulder to make sure the good guys aren't going to come and shoot me? Probably a good idea. Do I need to put the gun up next to my head and do pirouettes and crap like that? No, probably not. The gun sight methodology, I really like that. Like, hey, take a quick scan, assess what's going on, and then make your next decision. The other one I do that to kind of eliminate some range kata, and I know I'm just pushing this back to the block I teach, but it's what I know. I would tell people on follow through, be ready to take another shot if you need to, and your command to shoot is the whistle. And the number of people I'd see go, oh, he called for 2, boom, boom. And I'd go, boop. Oh crap, I'm supposed to shoot again. Like, without telling them, hey, I'm going to make you at some point in here, I'm going to give you another command to shoot. You better be ready to do it.
Mhm.
I'd see a number of people drop their muzzle, do the look arounds, and then they get another indicator that there's a threat, and it's, oh, all the guys that followed through and they're prepped, ready to go. Okay, now they're okay. This guy's playing catch up. So we got to be real careful with how we train our brain to react under certain circumstances, and it's very difficult to simulate that on the flat range. Is Hanny McMood coming in?
It looks
It looks
like it.
he
Looks like
is.
it.
Well, it's been
So
nice seeing everybody tonight. Great time, Lee.
So
We'll catch y'all later.
but to round all of that out is, if nobody puts you into a position where you may have to react or you may have to do something that's out of your comfort zone, and you don't know what the next shot calls for, or the next task you may be given, you might be wasting your time trying to break metrics. Does that make sense? And if you can shoot competently, then be prepared to shoot competently, regardless of the metric, right?
one of the
So now
things,
yeah.
I was going to say, no, go ahead if you got to finish off.
No, and what I was going to propose to that is, that's one of the reasons that I find a lot of guys in the community that are pretty high level trainers, like Justin Dial, very big on par times as opposed to metrics, right? As opposed to, can I do this much in this time? It's, can you perform in this time, regardless of what the next iteration you're going to be requested to do is. Can you do it in this time frame? We're not trying to go beyond that. We're just trying to operate in this window of time. So anyway, go ahead, Eric.
One of the things we've seen at Gunsight, and we have had this issue happen of people trying to do the speed reholstering, right? Like, I got to either whip the gun back to my chest, or I got to whip the gun into the holster. And the problem with that, and it's not just happened at Gunsight, it's happened other places, is we get the finger on the trigger while reholstering, negligent discharge. Trying to get people to get off the gas on that end of the problem can be positively impacted by trying to work them through some semblance of a reasonable post-engagement sequence, right? Muzzle down, head up off the sights, take a look around, deep breath, finger up to the frame slide interface. Now we can go back. You were talking about not knowing what the next drill is. One of the things for for working street cops and decent normal human beings is I don't know how long I'm going to be holding somebody at gunpoint. I worked most of my career in a suburban low income area adjacent to a city. Right. So there were like 3 of us that would work the metropolitan area around the city. You know, we would get help from guys in outlying beats, but I was in an event where I was holding people at gunpoint over 5 minutes, which wasn't that long. Right. I also had another event where I went to an officer involved shooting where I had a 45-minute code 3 run to get to that scene. Right. And that dude was hanging out for, I think he had about 35 minutes before the first unit got there, where he was holding a dude at gunpoint he had just shot. So the gun's not going away. I think if the principle or the philosophy behind it is understood, and that's what's drilled, right, which goes to the context thing that we've talked about, it's going to be better off than just do X, whatever X is, right? Here's why we're doing it. Here's what we want you to accomplish with it. Here are ways to accomplish that.
Yeah.
I had an interesting one in my block. I gave the instructions that, okay, the whistle is your command to shoot. Your follow through is to be ready to shoot again. If I say X number of words, you're going to recover to a low ready, and then I'll tell you to holster. If I give you another whistle, you need to be prepared to shoot. Well, how many times do we shoot it? I don't care, man. It's your class. The course says 4 rounds. You can shoot 4 rounds. You can shoot 1 round. Hold yourself to the same accuracy standard. Yeah, but how many rounds do I shoot? Again, that is your choice. And it was like, well, I shouldn't have to make this. A lot of the feedback I got was, well, I shouldn't have to make decisions because you're giving the course a fire. And I'm like, if you shot 1, if I called for 4 rounds on the initial volley and I give you another whistle command, you can shoot once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, empty the mag as long as you hold that accuracy standard. Well, how many rounds do you want? It's your class, man. Shoot it all you want. And it was like, but you didn't tell me how many to shoot. Like, the second was like shooter's choice, bud. Like, make your own decision on that. As long as you're ready to shoot the next time I blow the whistle, we're all friends. And if I say recover to a low ready, you're ready to do that. Yeah, but how many rounds do I shoot? And I'm like, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about that turns into kata. Okay, if he gives a second whistle, I give the target 3 rounds. If I give a second whistle, I don't care if you mag dump it as long as you keep it in the same accuracy standard. Now, I'm not going to yell at you. Well, what if I shoot too many? Well, what if I don't shoot enough? Well, you tell me. What do you think you need to do? Just hold the accuracy standard. That's the only thing I've given you. And if I blow the whistle again, give it some more rounds if you want to, or give it 1, give it. Yeah, but, and this went in a cycle. And I'm like, do you see what I'm saying by you're getting ingrained in there's a command and I execute a command instead of let me think behind the gun.
Yep.
Because if you shoot 1, I'm happy. If you shoot 6, I'm happy. If you shoot 10 and they're all in the same accuracy standard, it's a happy meal. You get to reload before everybody, but it's your class. So I tried to implement some of that stuff just as well, think behind the gun. Don't just think about what I'm saying or what I'm asking you to do. Think behind the gun. So anyway, now Erick's going to sign up for my class next year, and I'm going to get real nervous because he's going to be in there. So,
the square range is already an artificial environment. And there's only so much that we can do in that environment. And I understand the compulsion to try to teach things that would translate out into the real world. But in my opinion, when we do things that are so artificial and manufactured and contrived, we're actually wasting time and programming students for the wrong things. Going back to, I was a student in my range master instructor class, and I was, you do coach people with the other students in the class. and we were shooting on an indoor range. And my partner for one of the sequences, every time a reload come up, they would almost bounce off the walls of the shooting stall that we were in, going side to side, and then they would struggle with the reload. I was like, hey, stick the reload. Well, why are you doing this dance in here? And the answer was, well, instructor so-and-so told me that we should be moving anytime we have to do that. I said, okay, I get it, but right now you're trying to pass a test. And why are we doing it artificially? You're just bouncing back and forth off of a wall. You're not actually moving to anywhere of benefit. You're just dancing. And then later on, that led to, with another student, that led to a discussion of a certain instructor's post-shooting scan technique, in which you actually you turn your back on the person you just shot.
Yeah.
And my point in the whole conversation was, why would I turn my back on the one person in the world that I know just tried to kill me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, yes, I should scan and check my area, but there are ways to do that without turning my back completely on the one person in the world. I just used deadly force on them because I thought they were trying to kill me. Yeah, that kind of thing is what gets me. And you know, going to what Bryan was talking about with the foot position in a class I took not too long ago. Overall, great class, but there's always little things. Was teaching that, if you had someone that was cross-side dominant, to teach them to shoot with their strong side foot forward. That only works standing on the line. That doesn't work when I'm having to go over there, or I got caught in a position where I can't get into that.
Or you're sitting in your car.
Yeah. What matters is getting the gun in a usable form in between me and the bad guy and pressing the trigger without misaligning the gun. And you got to be able to do that from whatever your stance is or whatever your position is. If I'm flat on my back, my feet position is not going to matter.
So
I use that as an example in mine.
I will say that getting people to work with the other foot forward is a step on that path.
Yeah.
Because whatever we teach as a platform, we have a platform, right? And if the student gets too ingrained in that platform to where they think that's the only thing they can do, now when they're walking forwards, or more realistically walking back, trying to get away from something, right, they're timing it to where if I'm not in that platform, I can't do stuff. So if then you can at least get them to accept that, whoa, what if I flip the other feet the other way? I can still shoot, I can still be on balance, I can still deliver force, manage force, do all those other good things. There's some validity to that. But it's like trigger pinning, right? It's one of those things where there's a point for it early on, very early on, and then you take it away and get the person to work the process later, right? So you have a platform. Now we've switched up the platform. Now you get to where you can do it in any position.
Eric, I think your point on that is contextual. Again, it's a good place to be. If the context makes that, because you're not going to be in your perfect shooting stance for most of the time you're involved in. It's not going to be.
I like the Bruce Lee quote. A good teacher protects his pupils from his own influence.
Yep.
Don't get so rigid in my format here that you lose the context of the fundamental arts, right?
But what's interesting, these same guys that have these habits ingrained into them with their classes or their agency or their club or whatever, you put them in a force on force with Sims and the wheels come off, and you don't even see that. You see mass confusion sometimes.
You go back to Dave Spalding classes in which you shoot from cover, and he makes the point of people teach using cover by the drill starts with you're already behind cover. How did you get there?
Exactly.
So if we want to get people to move, if we want to get them to learn to shoot from different platforms, etc., set up cover and have them move to cover.
So
it's not just a half step forward and a half step to the left like on a Georgia qual course either.
Yeah.
So to pimp my reactive shotgun class, that's what the class is working towards. But you start out a couple, 3 steps out from behind, out in front of cover with distance off to the side. Now you got to move rearward while running the gun, get back behind the cover itself, and then solve the problem. And thus endeth the pimping of that class.
We may or may not have Hanny Mahmood. He keeps appearing and disappearing on my screen, and sometimes he's on his side and sometimes he's vertical. Hanny, are you with us? Hanny, are you with us?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Barely. Your internet's bad, Hanny.
Hanny, would you just go get the equipment for your podcast and you could probably be understood?
Well, we'll have Hanny here to be our emotional support guy for the rest of the episode, because I can't hear what
he's so
saying.
supportive.
I want to throw out a couple things on that, and
Sure.
I want to discuss it on is, I think, since we are on a square range and that is our most used format that we have, we need to get people thinking about not being on the range, but being, and I'm a big fan of visualization. I want them to visualize the fact that they're not on a range, they're in their home, they've made a traffic stop, they're contacting some guy on the street, and that they're dealing with that guy who's trying to take them away from their family. And they need to understand that this guy may have friends. So we try to give them that visualization of, what are you trying to accomplish with this thing? Is it shooting this piece of paper, or are you taking on somebody who's trying to kill you? Again, giving how many rounds are fired may be necessary, but you can say, okay, these hits are required to neutralize the threat. And if they shoot 3 and 2 of them are not in the primary hit zone, then are they quitting? Or are they continuing to shoot until they put that threat down? But they got to put the hits where they're supposed to be, even if they do happen to miss. Make them responsible for the rounds they miss. Make them think about the fact of why they're doing it. Make them answer why they do what they do. If you've got the guy who's got the bungee cord who brings the gun back to his chest real quick, say, okay, how do you know those 2 rounds worked? And they look at you like, what? Well, how do you know those 2 rounds you just put in that chest worked? What if they didn't? What if they didn't work? And I get thinking about it, and I go, oh yeah, it makes sense. I said, if you want to bring it back, fine, but bring it back after you know the fight's over mentally. And you've said to yourself, okay, this guy is down. So I try to make it a mental game, at least when I teach my classes, that, what you do here still programs you what you will probably do on the street, but not necessarily, because the circumstance can dictate differences. Like we talked about these range katas and then putting them on force, that things change dramatically with the students, that they don't do what they thought they were going to do on the street. And like I said, from my gun sight days, I thought I was going to go, this little paint the fist thing, because that's what I was taught. And that's the last thing I want to do when I actually shot somebody. So it does make a difference, but I want to try to get them that mindset that this is not a piece of paper, that is somebody trying to hurt them. And they do have to make sure that they look around for that other potential threat. If, as Erick said, it's there. If you're in your bedroom and you're back against the wall, there's not a lot of reason to look around.
Yep.
So you got to put it where it's supposed to be. Okay. And if it's applicable, apply it. One of the terms we like to use is a tactical drag bag. We teach you a whole variety of techniques and tactics. Once we teach one of those, you take it and you throw it in the drag bags you have with you. You carry that drag bag with you everywhere. Now you get involved in something and you just have to get involved and go, oh, hey, I can do this. And you reach your bag, you pull out that tactic and you apply it to that particular drill, because that now is applicable. But if it isn't applicable, like there's no cover, then you're not going to use cover. But if there is cover, you should be using that part of the tactic and move to cover. So I think we need to get out of this regimented idea of it. And I think a lot of instructors are doing it so they can make it look tactical. I mean, I know we've used that term a lot, but Rob sent me a great video, and I don't remember who the guy is, but he's an instructor on the different types of shooters out there. And he showed the instructor, and it was you guys may have seen it. He plays different students. But the one he was the instructor, and he went through this whole kata thing, coming out shooting, doing his loads, doing his thing, and he's turning, and all. I mean, it's humorous, but I've seen that, and I can't say that I haven't even taught some of that until I realized the fact that, hey, this is stupid. The stuff I taught early on about shooting around cover and then jumping back behind the cover. That's stupid. If I shot somebody, I need to stay out there and watch him because I don't know what he's doing. So we need to get that mindset to people. And I think that's the important part of this versus getting into that, again, range idea of it. So, all right. Hanny, it looks much better now, buddy. You're clear. We can see. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
No,
Yes.
No,
You still can't hear me.
no.
Now we have a great camera view of the top of your head and then your nose. All right.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Hanny. That's why I keep saying no.
Hannah, do you have anything to add on range katas and stuff that people do just for the sake of doing something on the
Oh,
range?
let's all do it again from the beginning.
Take it
Okay.
from the top.
I'll add one thing. And Mark, who is one of the wisest men that I know, I caught what he just said. And I'll tell you something that I literally learned this morning. There's a guy that I met today that's in our industry, and he early in his life he worked for a well-known technology company that's near and dear in Texas here, and they had an acronym which is something like do the best that you know. And basically what he was saying is we in terms of production, it was all about technology. He was like, we did the best that we knew until we find something better or more usable or whatever. But he said the trick was that he learned, and this I think was before he got into law enforcement, was do the best that you know until we learn better. And then we learn better, we change. I hope that all made sense.
It does.
Perfect sense.
Why?
And the thing is in the firearms world, sometimes it's treated like a religion. And it's like, well, this is what we do. And then time stops and you teach that for however many years. And good instructors are like, this is the best I know how to teach until I learn something better. And if the fact is that I'm teaching something different now than I did 5 years ago, is completely expected in other arenas and in other businesses and the technology world and so on. But we don't seem to do that in terms of firearms. It's like somehow if you change, it's like you're breaking the code.
Yeah.
But I just thought I'd add that because I just heard what Mark had to say.
I got to know why we've been discussing this for 45 minutes. And then my brother from another mother shows up and summarizes everything in about 5 sentences.
thank you.
Thanks, Annie.
I was thinking the same thing.
Because that's who he is.
He's not
Well, there is that.
but-
And the other part of it is I'm the only idiot in this circle that is sitting here on this porch in uniform without my vest and without my duty gear, because at age 53, I've jumped back into the stuff that all of us were doing like 25 years ago. So there is that.
All right, we've been going a pretty good while here. We probably need to start working towards the wrap up, but I don't want to close out without addressing Nashville and what happened this weekend. I'm not going to get into a crazy hot wash of the whole thing. Just want to point out that, all of us, whether or not you're in this profession, if you're human, you are sickened by what happened at Uvalde. Both the carnage and, quite frankly, the abysmal response that happened afterwards. Also sickened by what happened Monday in Nashville. But we saw the difference in the response between people who were willing to go in and do what they swore they would do. I know we all have our different oaths across the different states and everything that we swear to, but there's an underlying thing that transcends the words.
Yes, sir.
When you put on the badge, you swore to do the thing. And we saw guys who lived up to what they swore they would do. And, you know, they kept the carnage to a minimum. They got in and they did their thing. And of course, then immediately people seize on because that guy said, push the LPVO. If he just said, push the rifle, nobody would have paid any bit of attention to the fact there was an LPVO on top of the rifle. Well, guess what? It stayed in the one position the entire time. The V part of that whole acronym never got used. And it looks to me like he rotated the rifle at a 45-degree angle and used that offset optic on the forearm instead of using
I
the
have
LPV.
heard he used the 1 power optic, not the low variable power.
Yeah.
Which brings up a whole other
Yeah.
thing for another day.
Yeah. But
That's a discussion.
so without getting into the specifics of technique, everything, I just want to go around and give everybody a chance just to say what's on your mind about what you saw. I will say, you know, immediately the two officers' pictures that fired shots, their pictures were plastered all over the internet of these are the heroes. That dude with the shotgun, whatever was going to happen, he was going to be there at the end of it. And he was going for it. He didn't drop a hammer on anybody, but he was there. And had he had the shot, he would have done so as well. There's no doubt.
Just because you're there, it doesn't mean you got to play.
Right. And there were other people that were moving and doing the thing. It looked to me like we had a successful link up with two different teams.
Which is hugely freaking difficult to do for real.
It looked like people had jobs to do. They knew what their jobs were and they did them.
Yeah.
And I know some people, well, they could have done it. Their search technique over here, whatever. Dudes did the thing. That's it. Eric?
Yeah. Have
I-
Erick do it first. Because,
Yeah.
you know, Erick is the man.
Oh, this obviously is payback, isn't it? Had I been on the ground in Texas, I would have hoped I would have done something else. Right. I wasn't there. So all I can do is say that. Had I been on the ground in with the guys at Metro Nashville, and I've been fortunate to work and teach with some of those dudes at Gunsight, I would have hoped I would have done exactly what those guys did. Every one of them, you know, they're clearing the rooms deliberately until they get the indicator of the shots, and then they move to the gunfire and they ended the problem. It wasn't what they ended it with. It was that they moved to the problem, found it, and ended it. And I would have hoped I would have done what they did.
Hanny?
Oh, okay. First of all, I'll go with this.
Go with
Erick's
it,
on
Hanny.
the money as always. And I mean that honestly. The shortest version possible is exactly what Erick said. The only thing I'll add is about 5 hours ago, I walked the school that is in the middle of the city that I currently work in. And I'd mentioned that yesterday to the guy that I'm riding around with in my extremely abbreviated FDO period. But anyway, so we did it today. And we stopped by the school, and the first reaction was like, oh, is there a problem? And we were like, no. And I introduced myself. I said, no, I'm the new guy. And I haven't walked around your school. They're like, we're really happy to see you. Okay, so that's the preface. The thing is that that's what I did today, because I brought it up and I said, you know, the last time that I literally walked a school for these purposes was 7 years ago. And I walked it, and I looked at the doors, and I looked at egress, ingress, all those things. And there's a lot of things that you can plan for in advance. But ultimately, it's what Erick said. Those guys did what needed to be done. To quote Patton, the best plan executed A good plan executed today is better than the best plan executed 3 weeks from now. And, they moved at the rate they moved until they got data or stimulus and said, no, now we need to do this. And they did it. The one thing is, on some of the social media is people are, hammering on this whole LPVO thing. Look, that's their terminology. I really don't care if they'd have yelled, supercalifragilistics or whatever. That was their terminology for AR guy up front. Not a bad idea. And that's what they did. And it all worked out for the good. And bless all those guys.
And
Excuse
just
me.
right after he told the LPVO to move to the front, he actually puts his hand on the back of the guy with the shotgun and pushes him up
Sure.
to the front as well.
Right.
Okay. We all need Mossberg 590s because there was one in the video.
Yeah.
And
so however it worked out, whatever phraseology they used,
yeah,
whatever it is, and I see some guys on especially Facebook nitpicking about, oh, it's not about the gear. Okay, no one cares about the gear. Look, the fact that the guy yelled LPVO, that's just their terminology for AR guy up front. Whatever it is, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that this is as good as it could have gotten from the time that they got there.
Yeah.
And if more people acted like that,
mm-hmm.
we'd be in a better world.
We would be.
And I couldn't resist the temptation. I posted, on Facebook today. I said, I've been carrying an LPVO for 20 years before I knew what the phrase LPVO meant. Because in the year 2000, I went to a loophole CQT. Now remember, this was 23 years ago. And that damn optic was heavy, ugly. It was only 1-3, and it cost $700 23 years ago. But that's what I went to, and I liked it, and I've been running essentially an LPVO since then. Okay, great. That doesn't make me smart. That doesn't make me psychic or whatever. That's just what works best for my eyes, and it's always set on 1 unless you need to dial up and whatever. But please, people, don't dwell on that. Dwell on what they did. And what they did was, frankly, what we hope would happen every time.
God, we can hope.
Rob Garrett.
First, I'll say they did their moral duty, and they understood it going in, and they were selfless in doing it. Forget the equipment, forget the tactics, forget anything. That's the first thing, the willpower to step up front and run to the sound of gunfire and disregard their own risk and everything else. That's what we hope we would do. That's what we hope, all of us would do. All the other stuff we can nitpick, we can talk about. From a personal standpoint, being an old guy, when I saw a short barrel pump gun in the video, it warmed my heart. Okay.
Me too, Rob.
But you can't help get a little lump in your throat when you watch that, man. I mean, the tragedy, but then what they did. And unfortunately, not just Uvalde, but time and time again, we've seen people not willing to do what they have taken an oath to do and what they're in a position and trained to do. And this just warmed my heart that there's some young people out there that are willing to step up and fulfill their moral duty and do it with bravery. You didn't hear profanity. There weren't mag dumps. It was what it should have been and what it should be. And so I was, I'd buy either one of them a drink, anything they were drinking, anytime, anywhere. So,
Mark?
Well, you guys kind of, confess on what I did. I'm very happy to see the fact that we would do something this time. I would like to see all the after action of the situation on this one. There were a lot of officers in that hallway, and I'm not sure why they were all standing there. There may have been reasons. I don't know because I wasn't there. But I saw the two guys brush by a bunch of officers. And I guess maybe somebody said that the tactics or the techniques they teach is to bring the rifle up front. Well, you know what? If I got somebody that's shooting at people or that is actively shooting and I got a pistol, I have a defensive means to train it myself. So I'm not sure. Again, I'm not trying to criticize any of the other guys that were there because I don't know what they were doing. And everything was fine. I just wonder, I have to wonder why, and I want to read why the guys that were there in front weren't taking action instead of just standing there. So we'll see. But I think they did a great job. I think it was an excellent performance as far as what they needed to do. And thank God those guys were there. It saved lives. You know, I'm very happy that I'm happy for my profession, unlike I was for Uvalde. Uvalde, I was embarrassed for my profession.
Bryan?
I'm going to take it in a different direction. Because I have a kid in junior high, or actually in high school now, but cops did what they were supposed to. Did anybody read who he was shooting at when they actually engaged him? He was shooting at the cops, right? There's a reason he was shooting at the cops, because there wasn't any kids and there wasn't any teachers left to shoot at. So I'm going to throw it in a totally different direction and say, you know, the teachers, the staff that got those kids out of there efficiently,
Absolutely.
without exposing them to gunfire. Cops are going to, and it's not taken away from Nashville.
Mhm.
Those guys went and handled business.
Yeah.
And that's what we're supposed to do. But you had teachers and staff members that took the kids that they could and got them out of there. So I'm really interested to see what their training was, because cops did what cops do: run to the sound of gunfire, kill it.
But if
And
you
when that,
also
you know,
heard, you know, the principal confronted him in the hall, or
yeah,
confronted her in the hall, and
yeah,
stood her ground to the point before she was shot and killed.
yeah. So the cops, good on you. To me, the teachers and the staff are the heroes here, because they minimized the loss of life. And the only thing the guy had left to shoot at was the cops that were responding. So I'll kind of take it in a different direction, and we'll wait until the after actions to see how the cops performed. And of course, everybody in the world will armchair quarterback them, but the people that don't get enough attention are the people that shuffled those kids to safety.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I want to see, you know, who comes up on social media with the Nashville drill now, like they did with the Dickens and all the other insanity out there.
Yeah. And P.S.
Yeah.
F those guys.
Yeah.
That's just the way I can say it.
Yep.
But you know, you've got now a whole school full of kids that have a lifetime of trauma to overcome. You have cops that have a lifetime of trauma to overcome. But you know what? The cops, we're gonna take care of them, and we're gonna look at how they performed, etc.
Yeah.
But the people that go kind of unnoticed are the people that shuffled every one of those kids to safety.
And by the way, my wife taught school for 38 years, so that did not escape me either, Brian.
Yeah.
Like Bryan's saying, those school teachers, the school staff, and it being a private school, I'm going to spitball that might have had something to do with the apparently trained nature of that response, or at least the audible call that was executed on the fly. But yeah, like Bryan's saying, those folks deserve some serious recognition.
Yeah.
Good call.
And, you know, there's just not words to express to the families that lost loved ones in that incident and any of the others. You know, us being gun guys and training guys, we're tending to focus in on all of the, what did the people do that survived, or whatever the word would be. You know, parents are burying children. And
parents and dads and brothers and sisters.
And that we can't lose that. And that's why we have to be willing to go in and stop evil when evil exists, whether you be a private citizen, whether you be a badge toter, or what are you going to be? Evil is a thing, and the only thing that stops evil is good, and being able to combat it. And if not, it'll be left to run amok. And we have gone way over time tonight, so we're going to skip to go around and hey everybody, what's coming up next? Check out Cougar Mountain Solutions. Check out EDC Belt
Yeah.
Company and Bryan Eastridge and the Off Duty On Duty podcast. Mark teaches all of his classes in secret, so I can't tell you that.
AFTC, but yeah, anyway, we'll worry about it later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
The nationally
Erick,
recognized firearms training program.
yeah.
And nationally recognized firearms training program. Thank you.
Yeah. Eric and John, Hearn and I do have the Cognitive Conclave coming up the last weekend of this month. There are only 4 slots, I think, remaining in that. So get on the firstpersonsafety.com webpage and get into that if you're interested in getting into it. And, you know, well, I guess we could go long tonight because we didn't have an episode last week. So we've averaged it all together to make a normal size episode. And for those of you in the audience, I'm sorry that this production schedule has been a little bit erratic lately. It's just, it couldn't be helped with being on the range on the weekends, working some nights and being on the road some. And this past weekend being at TacCon, I'm going to try to get back on our regular production schedule. Thanks to everyone who played along tonight for this episode. And to your audience, know that your most important your most important asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.